Today, we're introducing 3 revolutionary products. iPhone.
That's iPod.
There it is, right there.
This amazing little device holds 1,000 songs, and it goes right in my pocket.
His iMac.
Every one of those perfect products were built on psychological torture.
I ended up changing my entire life. I lost my wife in that process. I lost my children in that process. I lost the whole structure of my life was just changed forever by going and working on the Mac.
And this is Jobs refusing to acknowledge his own child exists because she wasn't designed by him. The man who created the most beautiful products in human history was also one of the most emotionally destructive leaders who ever lived. And for 30 years, everyone ignored the human cost because the products were just too good. But what if I told you his cruelty didn't make the product the best? What if his perfectionism was actually holding him back? And what if the psychology that drove him to build Apple is the same psychology that's destroying your productivity right now? Because here's what no one talks about. Steve Jobs' greatest successes came after he learned to stop being a perfectionist tyrant. The iPhone, built by a completely different version of Jobs than the one who terrorized employees in the 1980s. And in the next 27 minutes, I'm going to show you the dark psychology behind every perfect Apple product. How Jobs' childhood trauma created a control addiction that nearly destroyed him. Why his early success was built on fear. And how he finally learned the difference between perfectionism and perfectionist abuse. And more importantly, I'm going to show you how his story reveals the productivity traps that are sabotaging you right now. Because if you've ever found yourself unable to shift something because it's not ready yet, if you've ever pushed people away in the name of high standards, if you've ever sacrificed relationships for work perfection, you're living the early Steve Jobs playbook. And that playbook almost killed him. But first, we need to understand where this all even began. Because the man who would go on and revolutionize technology started life as an unwanted baby. And that rejection created a psychological wound that would shape every product, every relationship, and every decision for the next 56 years. I need you to think about something before you even continue. What's one thing in your life that you're trying to make perfect right now? Hold that in your mind, because by the end of this story, you're going to see it completely differently. February 24th, 1955. Steve Jobs entered the world already rejected. His biological parents, college students who couldn't keep him, hand him over to strangers. Now imagine, you're that baby. You can't understand language yet, but your nervous system is recording everything. And the first message you ever receive is you weren't good enough to keep. That rejection doesn't just hurt, it rewires your brain. It creates what psychologists call abandonment schema. The core belief that if you're not perfect, people will leave you. That voice in your head that says the work isn't ready yet, that's the same wound. His adoptive parents, Paul and Clara Jobs, they tried to heal this wound. They told him constantly, you're special, you're chosen, we wanted you specifically. But here's the psychological trap. When you tell a wounded child they are special, you accidentally teach them that being special is the only way to be loved. So young Steve learned, I must be extraordinary or I'll be abandoned again. Watch teenage Steve working on electronics. He's not just building circuits, he's building proof that he's worth keeping. Every perfect shoulder joint is evidence against abandonment. His father Paul was a machinist who taught him something that would define everything. The parts you can't see should be just as beautiful as the parts that you can see. Think about that for a second. This isn't about craftsmanship. This is about psychological armor. If every hidden detail is perfect, no one can find a reason to reject me. How many hours have you spent perfecting things that no one will ever see? That's not dedication. That's trauma response. 1976. Apple is born in a garage. Steve Wozniak creates the technical magic, but Jobs controls everything else: the design, the pricing, the vision, and the message. And it works. Apple 1 sells. Apple 2 becomes a phenomenon. By age 25, Jobs is worth over $200 million. But here's where his psychology becomes dangerous. Every success validates the wound. Every time his controlling perfectionism wins, it reinforces the core belief: I must control everything or I'll be abandoned again. So he starts controlling people the same way he controls products.
Steve is so hugely successful, and yet he treated so many people so badly. How much of an asshole do you have to be successful? What is the moral of the story here?
Because in his mind, people are just complex system that needs to be optimized. Be honest with yourself. Do you try to control people the way you control your work? Do you get frustrated when others don't meet your standards? You're about to see where that leads. By his mid-20s, Jobs has developed what we call binary thinking. Everything is either brilliant or garbage. People are either geniuses or idiots. Products are either revolutionary or worthless. There is no middle ground, because middle ground feels dangerous. When your survival depends on being perfect, middle ground feels like death. And this is where Steve Jobs learns the lesson that will destroy everything he touches for the next decade. He learns that cruelty can create beautiful things. Picture this moment with me. You're an Apple engineer in 1979. You've been working on a project for 3 months. Sleepless nights, missed dinners, everything riding on this presentation. You walk into Steve's office. He looks at your work for exactly 10 seconds. Then he directly looks at you and says, "This is shit. You're either not smart enough to make it work or you don't care enough. Which is it?" This isn't a story. This happened every single day. And I've read dozens of accounts. People throwing up in the bathrooms after feedback sessions. Engineers having panic attacks before every product reviews. But here's the part that messes with your head. It often worked. People did create better work after being torn apart. So Jobs learns a toxic lesson. Emotional cruelty gets better results. 1978. Jobs is 23, dating Chris Ann Brennan, and she gets pregnant. Most people, when they hear you're going to be a father, they feel something. Fear, excitement, love, panic, but something human. But Jobs, his first instinct was denial. Not because he doesn't believe it's his child, but because a baby represents the ultimate nightmare for a control addict. Something he can't design, something he can't optimize, can't make perfect. Even when DNA proves that Lisa was his daughter, he continues denying it.
When a court-ordered DNA test proved Jobs' paternity, he stopped fighting Chrisann in court. She was on welfare at the time, so Jobs reluctantly agreed to pay $500 a month in child support.
What a piece of shit, bro. Fuck. Because accepting her means he created something imperfect. I don't know why. Leave it. Something that will need him to be vulnerable instead of controlling. This is perfectionist ultimate fear. Anything they can't make flawless, they rather pretend it doesn't exist. And let me ask you something. What have you abandoned because it got messy? What relationships have you pulled back from when they required vulnerability instead of control? Meanwhile, at Apple, the cruelty is escalating. Jobs create what employees call management by public humiliation. He'll walk through the office, stop at someone's desk, examine their work, and announce loudly whether they're A players or B players. B players don't last long. They can't handle the goddamn environment because this guy is fucking toxic. And here's the uncomfortable truth that we have to face. This toxic system often creates better products. Believe it or not, it does. Fear pushed people beyond what they thought they were even capable of. But fear-based motivation has two fatal flaws. First, it's not sustainable. People burn out or just break down. Second, it kills the creative risk-taking that produces true innovation. There's a story that haunts me. An Apple engineer spent 6 months perfecting a piece of code. When he presented it to the Jobs, Steve looked at it and said, "A first-year computer science student could write better code." The engineer went to his car and cried for an hour. And here's the thing, the code was actually fucking brilliant. That was one of the best codes ever written. But Jobs was just having a bad day. But that engineer never felt confident about his work ever again. Jobs had created a system where excellence depended on his personal involvement in terrorizing people. He had made himself indispensable through fear. And this was about to teach him the hardest lesson of his life. Because here's the thing about making yourself indispensable: through control. The moment people find a way to work without you, they will. And that's exactly what happened. In May 1985, the Apple board did something Jobs never saw coming. They fired him from his own company. The perfectionist, who couldn't tolerate any level of failure, was about to face the ultimate failure: getting kicked out from his own company. That's crazy, bruh. Because this wasn't just a setback. This was psychological devastation. Because remember, his entire identity was built on the belief that perfect control prevents abandonment. But he was here, abandoned from his own company. That's crazy. May 1985, Steve Jobs gets fired from Apple. The man who built the company, removed from operational control by his own brand. I want you to imagine that mental spiral. For 30 years, you believed that if you just control everything perfectly enough, people won't leave you. And then people you control most intensely leave you anyway. He starts Next Computer, and initially nothing had changed. Same controlling behavior, same perfectionist obsessions, and same binary thinking. Next creates gorgeous computers that almost nobody buys. They're too expensive, too perfect, too removed from what people actually need. This is perfectionism in its purest, most destructive form. When you're so focused on making something so perfect, you forget to make it even useful. But something else happens during these wilderness years. Jobs buys a small computer graphics company from George Lucas, Pixar, and animation forces him to confront something that he has never had to deal with: genuine creative collaboration. Homie still didn't genuinely try to even collaborate properly, and he had to do it now. You can't animate a movie through fear. You can't control every frame through intimidation. Animation is messy, iterative, collaborative. It requires trusting other people's creativity. There's behind the scenes footage from Toy Story development where you see something different. He's still intense, still demanding, but he's listening. For maybe for the first time in his adult life, he's trusting others to be creative. Damn.
How do you think of yourself? I mean, after Apple, after Next, how do you think of yourself?
You know, the things that I've done in my life, I think the things we do now at Pixar, these are team sports. You know, they're not something that one person does. We've got, you have to have an extraordinary team, because these are, you're trying to climb a mountain with a whole party of people. A lot of stuff to bring up the mountain. So one person can't do it.
Think about this. When was the last time you truly trusted someone else's creative process? When did you last let go of control and let someone else continue? Most of us can't remember. I can't. In some ways, I am him. Meanwhile, his personal life is a wasteland. His relationship with Lisa, his daughter, remains broken. Former friends won't return his calls. His health is declining from isolation and stress. You know what's heartbreaking? Really heartbreaking? There are photos of Jobs from this period where he has achieved incredible success with Pixar, but he looks completely alone. Success with a relationship is just elaborate loneliness. November 1995, Toy Story premieres. It's Pixar's first feature film, and it's a massive hit. Massive. I still love it. I love watching Toy Story. But watching the behind the scenes footage, you see a different version of Steve Jobs. Still perfectionist, still demanding excellence, but leading through inspiration rather than intimidation. The new Jobs says this scene is good, but we could make it better if we tried this or that. He was collaborating. Same standards, but completely different approach. He has learned you can be a perfectionist without being a fucking tyrant. And then something almost impossible happens, like almost a scene from a movie. Apple, 90 days from bankruptcy, asks him to come back. That's a true hero story. Dang, the company that abandoned him needs him to save it. But the Steve Jobs who returns in 1997 is not the same Steve Jobs who left in 1985. 12 years of exile taught him something that no amount of early success could ever. You can demand excellence without destroying people. And what happens next proves something revolutionary about perfectionism that changes everything we think we know about high performance. July 1997, Steve Jobs returns to Apple as interim CEO. The company is 90 days from bankruptcy. Everyone expects vintage Jobs, heads rolling, public humiliation, fear-based motivation. But in the first meeting, something feels different. To everyone, yes, he's still intense. Yes, he still has impossibly high standards, but the cruelty is mostly gone. Homie is a changed man now. The story is so good, bruh. Fuck. What changed? 12 years of exile taught him the difference between perfectionism and perfectionist abuse. He learned you can inspire people into excellence instead of intimidating people into it. Same standards, but completely different energy. And the results speak for themselves. The iMac launches in 1998 and saves Apple. But more importantly, it proves something revolutionary. You can create perfect products through inspiration instead of intimidation. I think there's an interview with an iMac engineer who said, like, for the first time in his career, he wasn't like really afraid to bring Steve a crazy idea because he knew he would either love it or help it make it better. He wouldn't destroy the guy for even trying. And that's the evolution of perfectionism. From I must control every detail to I will set an impossible vision and trust brilliant people to make it real. Two very different mentality. And it's not just his professional relationship are healing. In the late 1990s, Jobs finally starts repairing his relationship with Lisa, his daughter. He brings her into his house, pays for her education, and begins the long journey of earning the forgiveness from his own daughter. Then comes the iPod. 1,000 songs in your pocket. An impossible vision that he trusts his brilliant team to figure it out somehow. And they do. Which brings us to the iPhone. The project, the very project that would define his legacy and the reason why we're even talking about him right now. Here's what most people miss about iPhone development. Jobs redesigned the interface dozens of times. Classic perfectionist behavior. But he's not breaking people in the process. He's obsessing over the product, not over terrorizing the humans he's working with. And this is the key lesson. You can be obsessive to your work without being abusive to people. High standards for products doesn't require low dignity for people. It can be maintained. Comes January 9th, 2007, the iPhone launch. Pure Jobs, perfectionist, visionary, demanding. But watch his body language on stage. He's not performing alone anymore. He's with his team. He's representing a team. 2 years prior to the iPhone launch, Jobs gives commencement speech at Stanford that reveals everything about his psychological transformation. Stay hungry, stay foolish. I've heard that 1,000 times. Think about that. The man who spent decades demanding perfection in almost every single thing is now advocating for embracing imperfection, for taking risks, and for accepting that you can't control every single thing. But the most revealing part is when he talks about death. Death is very likely the single best invention of life. It clears out the old to make a way for new. The man who tried to control every single thing is finally accepting the one thing he can't control. In his final years, when he was fighting with cancer, we see the ultimate test of his evolved perfectionism. He could have spent his remaining time micromanaging Apple, trying to do this every single thing, but he didn't. Instead, he does something all Jobs could have never done. He builds systems and develops people who can succeed without him. He empowers Tim Cook, trusts Johnny Ive, creates a culture that can maintain excellence even after he's long gone. The ultimate perfectionist learns to create something truly perfect, a company that doesn't need its perfectionist founder. October 5, 2011, Steve Jobs dies at the age of 56. And Apple doesn't collapse. The culture of excellence continues. The products remain beautiful. I mean, look at the iPhone 17. I'm making this video after 2 days of the iPhone 17 launch. That thing is beautiful because he finally learned the secret. True perfectionism isn't about controlling everything. It's about inspiring everyone. So, what does Steve Jobs teach us about the dark psychology of perfectionism? First, perfectionism is usually a trauma wearing a success mask. Jobs' obsession with control wasn't about excellence. It was about avoiding abandonment. If you can't ship your work because it's not ready yet, ask yourself honestly, are you pursuing excellence or are you avoiding judgment? Which one is it? Ask yourself. Second, you can't have high standards without being a fucking tyrant. Jobs' greatest products came after he learned to inspire instead of intimidate. Stop trying to control people all around your work or your life and start empowering people to do their best. Third, perfect products doesn't require destroying people. The iPhone was built by a collaborative team, not terrorized individuals. Excellence and empathy aren't opposites, they are partners. They need each other. Here's what I want you to do right now. Pause this video and answer 3 questions honestly. Where are you being early Steve Jobs in your life? What are you trying to control that you need to let go of? Who have you pushed away in the name of maintaining standards? This week, I challenge you to ship something at 80% completion or 60%. Practice letting go of perfection. Reach out to someone you've been too busy for. Repair a relationship your perfectionism might have damaged. Give someone else the creative control over something you normally micromanage. Practice trusting others. Because here's what Jobs finally understood. Perfectionism should elevate others, not eliminate them. It should create beauty, not destroy humanity. It should make you better, not bitter. And remember that thing I asked you in the beginning? That thing you're trying to make perfect. What if, instead of controlling every single detail, you focused on inspiring on the outcome? What would change? If this perspective on perfectionism challenged how you think about success, hit that subscribe button. Because in the next video, we're exploring someone who represents the complete opposite approach. Someone who built an empire through radical vulnerability instead of control. And let me know in the comments, what are you going to let go this week? What control are you ready to release? And remember, true perfection isn't about having control. It's about knowing when to give up. I'll see you next week.
Stay hungry, stay foolish. Thank you all very much.